Why would a young woman from Boston agree to a secret marriage with one of New York's most powerful billionaires? Claire Bennett had asked herself that same question 1,000 times as she stood in the quiet corridor of Grant Tower, the 38-floor skyscraper that glittered over Manhattan. The air smelled faintly of polished marble and expensive cologne. Everything about this building screamed wealth, power, and danger. And here she was, 23 years old, holding a folder that contained a contract that could change the rest of her life. Claire was not supposed to be here. She should have been finishing her internship at a local firm, saving money for graduate school, and taking care of her grandfather in their modest Boston home. Life had been hard enough after her parents died in an accident years ago. Her grandfather had been the only anchor she had left. But last winter, when he collapsed in the kitchen, the doctor's words crushed her. His health was failing. His heart was weak. He might not have much time. In the quiet evenings that followed, Claire would sit by his bedside and listen to him speak about the family home. It was old, small, and worn down by years of unpaid bills, but to him it was sacred. It carried memories of Claire's parents and his late wife. He wanted her to keep it no matter what happened to him. The problem was clear. The debts piled up. The house was days away from being sold. That was when Ethan Grant appeared in her life again. Ethan Grant was only 30, but he had already become the youngest CEO of Grant Enterprises, a titan of investment banking. His name was whispered with a mixture of envy and fear across Wall Street. He was the kind of man who made headlines when he walked into a room. His presence was sharp, commanding, and almost unbearably cold. Yet beneath that surface, there was a story Claire barely understood. She had met him once before, though he did not know it. On the day of her parents' funeral, she had seen a tall young man standing by the church steps, his black suit soaked by rain. He had spoken quietly to her grandfather and then disappeared into the storm. Only years later did she realize that man was Ethan. Now he had come back into her world with an offer that made no sense and every kind of sense all at once. His family, the Grants, had been pressing him to marry Victoria Hale, the daughter of a powerful business ally. Victoria was beautiful, polished, and cruel in ways that only wealth could sharpen. Ethan wanted no part of her. He needed a way out, and Claire became his solution. The contract was simple on paper. She would marry him in secret for 1 year. During that time, she would continue her studies and live quietly while he managed the storm of corporate politics. In return, Grant Enterprises would purchase the debts on her grandfather's house and secure its future. No one outside their closest circle could know. No public photographs, no official acknowledgement. To the world, she would remain invisible. Claire had stared at the contract for hours. Marriage was supposed to be sacred, a bond of love and devotion. What Ethan was offering looked like a transaction, a cold exchange of needs. And yet when she thought of her grandfather's frail hands, clutching hers when she remembered the tears in his eyes as he begged her to protect their home, her resistance broke. She signed her name. Ethan's reaction was unreadable. He closed the folder, his dark eyes steady on hers, and said in a voice that carried both command and warning, "From this moment on, our lives are tied together. We keep this between us. There will be rules. Do not expect affection. Do not expect me to change." Claire had nodded, pretending her heart was not racing. She told herself it was only paper, only obligation. She told herself she could separate her life as a student from the secret life of being Mrs. Grant. But as she left the skyscraper that night, walking into the glittering Manhattan streets, a strange ache grew inside her. She had no idea that Ethan's promise of distance would crumble, that affection would come in unexpected ways, that enemies would appear in every shadow. She thought it was just a signature on paper. She never imagined his love and his enemies would make everything dangerously complicated. Claire Bennett sat at the edge of a sleek leather chair inside Ethan Grant's penthouse, her hands folded tightly in her lap as the contract lay on the glass table between them. Manhattan's skyline stretched beyond the towering windows, the city lights flickering like scattered stars across the night. The penthouse itself was intimidating, every surface, gleaming every detail, screaming sophistication and power. She felt like a trespasser, a girl from Boston, sitting in the private world of a billionaire. Ethan stood across from her, tall and controlled, his navy suit, fitting him with effortless precision. His gaze was steady, unreadable, as he poured a drink into a crystal glass. For a moment the silence pressed on her chest. She remembered the last time she signed a piece of paper that changed her life the moment she signed away her parents' small business after their deaths, because she was too young, too inexperienced to save it. Now here she was, again, pen in hand, asked to sign herself into a marriage that felt more like a business deal than a union of hearts. Ethan's voice broke the silence, low and deliberate. The rules are simple: no public appearances together, no mention of marriage to anyone, and no unnecessary entanglements. We play our roles, and after 1 year we dissolve it quietly. Claire swallowed hard. And during that year, what am I to you? She tried to keep her tone calm, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Ethan's eyes flickered a glint of something she could not name. You will be my wife on paper, nothing more. Claire signed the ink dark against the pristine sheet and felt her heartbeat echo in her ears. She told herself it was only survival. She told herself she was doing this for her grandfather. Yet deep down, a small voice whispered that nothing about this night was simple. Ethan closed the folder, his expression as cold as glass. Very well. From this moment, you are Mrs. Grant. Claire felt the words ripple through her. The name sounded foreign, heavy with a weight she had not expected. Ethan raised his glass, sipping as if nothing had changed, then turned back toward the window. You will remain at your apartment in Boston for now. Appearances matter. Do not expect to move in here. Claire nodded, though part of her had not expected otherwise. She was relieved and disappointed at once. It meant distance. It meant protection. But it also meant she was still an outsider in his life. Later that night, as she prepared to leave, she noticed a pile of folders on the side table. Her eyes fell on one marked Bennett Holdings, the failed company her grandfather had once poured his life into. Her chest tightened. Ethan followed her gaze. That debt is gone, he said simply. I bought it out this afternoon. Claire blinked in shock. You did what his tone did not change. Your family's debts are cleared. The house is secure. The rest is your concern. Claire's throat constricted. She had expected his coldness, his distance, but not this quiet act of protection. It was not affection, not kindness, as most would know it, but it was something undeniable. Thank you, she whispered, unsure if she should meet his gaze. He brushed past her words as if they meant nothing. Remember the rules, Claire. This is not about gratitude or feelings. It is about survival. Claire left the penthouse that night, with the city air brushing against her face, her mind reeling. She was a married woman, now bound to a man who claimed to feel nothing, who promised only rules and distance, yet who had just erased the greatest burden of her life. On the train back to Boston, she pressed her forehead against the cool glass, her reflection staring back at her with wide, uncertain eyes. She thought of her grandfather sleeping peacefully at home, unaware of the storm she had just walked into. She thought of Ethan's steady gaze, the way he commanded every room, the way he dismissed emotions like they were weaknesses. She told herself again it was only a contract, only a means to an end. But deep down she already knew that the moment Ethan touched her life, nothing would ever remain simple. The next morning, Claire woke to the sound of her grandfather humming in the kitchen. She smelled coffee and pancakes, the scent filling their small Boston home. Relief swept through her. For now he was safe. For now the house was safe. She forced herself to smile as she joined him, but inside she carried the secret of her marriage like a stone. Later that week, an envelope arrived by courier. Inside was a sleek black card embossed with the Grant Enterprises emblem. A note in Ethan's precise handwriting read, "Use this if you must. Do not abuse it." C.G. Claire stared at the initials, wondering how a man so cold could think to give her this lifeline. She tucked it away in her drawer, determined not to use it, yet the weight of it stayed with her. She attended her classes at NYU's, kept her internship applications alive, and visited her grandfather every evening. To the outside world, nothing had changed, but at night when she lay in bed, she would touch the ring on her finger and remind herself that she was now Mrs. Grant, even if no one knew. One evening, as rain poured over Boston, she received a call from an unfamiliar number. Claire Bennett Ethan's voice came through firm and unyielding. "Tomorrow you will accompany me to a charity gala." Claire's heart jumped. "But I thought you said—" Ethan cut her off. "The board requires my presence with a partner. One night will not break the contract. Be prepared." The line went dead. Claire sat frozen, the phone heavy in her hand. Her first public test had arrived, and with it, the first crack in Ethan's rules. She realized then that no matter how carefully she tried to keep things transactional, her secret marriage had already started to unravel. Claire Bennett walked into the grand ballroom of the New York Hilton. The next evening, her pulse quickening with every step she took across the marble floor. The chandeliers sparkled like constellations above her head, and the air carried the scent of roses and champagne. She had chosen a simple black gown, elegant but understated, hoping to vanish into the glittering sea of gowns and tuxedos. But she could not vanish, not tonight. Beside her walked Ethan Grant, his presence commanding, as always, his hand lightly resting at her back, in a gesture that looked protective to outsiders but felt like a reminder of their arrangement to her. Conversations hushed as they entered. Eyes turned whispers floated through the crowd like smoke. Claire kept her chin lifted, remembering Ethan's last words before they stepped out of the limousine. "You are Mrs. Grant. Carry yourself as such." She had wanted to argue to remind him that their marriage was not real, but the weight of his gaze silenced her. Now surrounded by powerful men and glamorous women, she felt the sharp contrast between their worlds more than ever. Olivia Parker, Her closest friend would never believe it if she saw Claire here. Claire's life had always been library corners, late-night study sessions, and caring for her grandfather, not flashing cameras and champagne flutes. A server approached with a tray of drinks. Ethan took one glass without hesitation. Claire hesitated until Ethan's low voice brushed her ear. "Take one. Smile. It is part of the act." She obeyed, lifting the glass, though her hand trembled slightly. Across the room, a familiar face appeared, framed by blonde curls and a dazzling red gown. Victoria Hale. Her eyes locked on Ethan with a hunger that made Claire's stomach twist. Then those same eyes slid to Claire, narrowing with contempt. Claire felt exposed, fragile, but she remembered Ethan's earlier words. "You are Mrs. Grant." The night stretched into a blur of introductions. Ethan presented her to board members and investors as if she had always been at his side. His arm occasionally brushed against hers, his voice steady and commanding as he maneuvered through the crowd. To outsiders it looked seamless, but inside, Claire battled nerves at every smile, every handshake. The whispers reached her ears anyway. Who is she? Where did she come from? She looks so ordinary. Claire's throat tightened, but she forced herself to keep smiling. When the music softened and the speeches began, Ethan leaned down and murmured, "You are doing well." The words should not have meant anything yet. Warmth spread through her chest. Later that night, as the gala ended and the limousine doors closed behind them, Claire finally exhaled. That was terrifying, she admitted, clutching the hem of her gown. Ethan regarded her silently for a long moment, then said, "You carried yourself better than most people born into this." Claire blinked, surprised. Was that a compliment? His lips quirked slightly, though his eyes remained guarded. "Do not get used to it." Claire looked out the window at the glowing city. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine that this was not a contract, that they were simply husband and wife, returning from an evening together. But reality pressed back quickly. She was living two lives. By day, she was still a graduate student preparing for an internship. By night, she was Mrs. Grant, a secret wife, navigating a dangerous world. A week later, she began her internship at a financial firm in Midtown Manhattan, only to discover it was a subsidiary of Grant Enterprises. She froze when she saw Ethan's portrait on the wall in the lobby. Panic fluttered inside her. If anyone suspected their connection, the contract would collapse. Inside the office, she found Olivia waiting at her desk with a grin. "Claire, I cannot believe we both got placed here." Olivia's excitement was contagious, yet Claire forced a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Yes, it is. Unexpected." As they settled in, Olivia leaned closer. "You know, I heard the CEO himself sometimes visits this branch. May people say he is terrifying." Claire's heart skipped. She forced a laugh. "I doubt someone like him would bother with interns." She prayed her words sounded convincing. The first week was manageable. She buried herself in reports and presentations, careful to stay invisible. Yet her eyes betrayed her when Ethan walked through the office unannounced. He moved with the same power that filled the ballroom, but here among employees, he seemed even more unreachable. Claire kept her head down, typing furiously, but her pulse betrayed her. Olivia nudged her. "Why is he looking this way?" Claire pretended not to hear her cheeks burning. Ethan passed without a word, his face a mask of indifference. Yet when he reached the elevator, his gaze flickered back for just a second. That night rain poured as Claire hurried across campus, her umbrella flipping inside out in the storm. Suddenly, a coat draped over her shoulders. She spun around. Ethan stood there, dark hair wet his gaze, intense. "You will catch pneumonia," he said curtly. Claire blinked in disbelief. "How did you even know where I was?" He ignored the question. "Wear it." With that, he turned and disappeared into the night, leaving her standing soaked but warm, her heart racing in ways she could no longer deny. Later, she found a coffee cup on her desk at the office. Her favorite order precisely how she liked it, with a note in neat handwriting. "Stay focused." Claire stared at the cup for a long time. It was only coffee, only a gesture, but it felt like the ground beneath her was shifting. She was supposed to be invisible. She was supposed to be detached. Yet Ethan was breaking his own rules, and her heart was beginning to betray her. She whispered into the empty office. This was supposed to be simple. The whispers began slowly like ripples across a pond, and soon they became the undercurrent of Claire's every day at the office. She could feel eyes following her. Whenever Ethan walked through the halls, could hear voices dip to a hush whenever she passed by. At first, she told herself it was imagination, a byproduct of nerves. But then she caught snippets that made her blood run cold. Why does the CEO always glance this way? She is just an intern. It makes no sense. Claire buried her face in spreadsheets, determined to remain invisible. But the more she tried to hide, the louder the whispers grew. Olivia Parker, sharp-eyed and protective, began to notice. One afternoon, as they shared lunch at a corner cafe, Olivia leaned forward. "Claire, tell me honestly, do you know Ethan Grant?" Her tone was casual, but her eyes searched deeply. Claire forced a laugh that sounded hollow even to her own ears. "Of course not. Why would I? A CEO does not notice someone like me." Olivia studied her for a long moment before sighing. He looked at you differently, Claire. People talk." Claire's stomach twisted, but she changed the subject, pretending interest in the menu. That night, as she left the building, she saw a figure waiting by the curb. Victoria Hale. Her gown shimmered beneath the streetlights, her confidence radiating like perfume. Claire froze, clutching her bag. Victoria's lips curved in a smile that was anything but warm. "So you are the intern everyone whispers about." Claire's pulse quickened. "I do not know what you mean." Victoria stepped closer, her heels clicking against the pavement. "Do not play dumb. People see the way Ethan looks at you. Let me warn you now. He belongs in my world, not yours. Whatever fantasy you have, end it before it ruins you." Claire's throat tightened. She wanted to shout that Ethan was not hers, that there was nothing to ruin, but the words lodged in her chest. Instead, she walked past, forcing her legs not to tremble. Behind her, Victoria's voice drifted like venom. "Girls like you never last." The next day, the office was buzzing with a new rumor. Claire Bennett is trying to climb the ladder using Ethan Grant. Someone said he is protecting her. Someone else claimed they saw them together. Claire's heart pounded with every word. She wanted to deny it, to fight back. But she remembered the contract. Silence was survival. Yet silence also made her look guilty. That afternoon, Olivia stormed into her cubicle, her eyes blazing. Who started this? She demanded answers. Claire shook her head, unable to speak. Olivia slammed her hand on the desk. "You are my best friend, Claire. If someone is targeting you, tell me." But Claire only whispered, "Please trust me. I cannot explain." Olivia softened, torn between loyalty and confusion. "Fine, but I will not let anyone destroy you." Meanwhile, Ethan remained silent. He passed Claire in the office with the same cool indifference, never once acknowledging her, but at night she would find subtle traces of his watchful presence. An umbrella left by her desk on a stormy evening. A message on her phone from an unlisted number. Be cautious. Do not walk alone. Claire clutched the phone, torn between gratitude and anger. His silence in public cut her, but his hidden gestures betrayed concern. Why did he keep her in the shadows while still protecting her from them all? She longed for answers, but the rules bound her. Victoria's presence only grew stronger. She appeared at company events, always at Ethan's side, her hand brushing his arm possessively. The tabloids called her the future Mrs. Grant, splashing glossy photographs across their pages. Claire stared at those images in quiet torment, her chest tight. But when she looked across the office and saw Ethan's impassive face, she reminded herself, this was the arrangement, this was the contract. Still the whispers burned deeper. One evening she overheard two senior analysts sneering in the break room. She is probably sleeping her way up. That is the only explanation. Something inside Claire snapped. She stormed into the hallway, her eyes blazing, but before she could speak, Ethan appeared like a shadow. His gaze silenced everyone. The analysts stiffened, mumbling apologies, and fled. Ethan's eyes lingered on Claire for a long heartbeat, before he turned and walked away, without a word. Claire stood frozen, her hands trembling. His silence was supposed to protect them, but to her it felt like abandonment. That night she lay awake in her Boston apartment, staring at the ceiling. The ring on her finger glinted faintly in the dark. She whispered into the silence, "How long can I survive like this? How long before the whispers destroy me?" The night of the corporate gala arrived like a storm that Claire could not escape. The venue was the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, its golden ceilings glittering with chandeliers and its walls lined with mirrors that reflected every jewel and every smile. Claire stood at the edge of the crowd in a pale blue gown that Olivia had insisted she borrow her heart, hammering as the music swelled around her. She had not wanted to come, but Ethan had appeared at her desk that morning, his voice calm and final. "You will attend, no excuses." Now here she was surrounded by power, wealth, and danger. Ethan moved through the crowd with effortless command, shaking hands with senators and bankers, his presence magnetic. Claire tried to remain unnoticed, but the weight of stares followed her like shadows. Then she saw Victoria Hale glide into the room. Dressed in crimson silk, her hair perfectly curled, she looked like she owned the night. People parted for her, as if she were royalty. When her gaze found Claire across the ballroom, her smile curved with satisfaction, like a predator spotting prey. Claire tried to look away, but Victoria approached swiftly, her heels clicking against the marble. My, she said sweetly, "so this is the little intern everyone whispers about." Claire's cheeks flushed. "I am just here for the event, nothing more." Victoria's voice sharpened, though her smile remained intact for the crowd. "You do not belong here. This world will swallow you whole. Leave Ethan to those of us who understand him." Claire's throat tightened. Before she could reply, Victoria raised her glass high, drawing the attention of nearby guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I propose a toast?" she announced, her eyes gleaming. "To Ethan Grant, the man who will soon make the smartest choice of his life." Whispers spread as people turned to look. Claire's pulse raced, knowing she was about to be humiliated. Victoria turned, gesturing toward Claire with a cruel smile. And to those who think they can sneak into circles they do not belong in, may you learn your place quickly. Laughter rippled through the crowd, sharp and cutting. Claire's vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. Her entire body trembled with humiliation. She wanted to run, but her feet refused to move. Suddenly warmth spread through her hand. Ethan was there, his tall frame beside her, his eyes flashing with steel, his fingers intertwined with hers, firm and deliberate. The room fell silent as he raised his voice, cold and unyielding. Enough. She is not an intern. She is my wife. The words echoed through the hall like thunder. Gasps rippled through the guests. Glasses froze, mid-air whispers exploded into a storm. Claire stood frozen, her heart pounding, her hand trembling in his grip. She had dreamed of a day he would acknowledge her, but never like this, never in front of the entire city. Reporters raised their phones, snapping photographs, recording every word. Investors exchanged shocked glances. Victoria's face drained of color, her glass slipping slightly in her hand. Ethan's gaze swept the room, daring anyone to question him. Claire could barely breathe. His declaration filled her with equal parts joy and terror. The secret they had guarded so fiercely was gone shattered in one public moment. She looked up at him, searching his face for answers, but his expression remained unreadable, carved in stone. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Cameras flashed questions, hurled from every direction, and security hurried them through back corridors. Claire sat in the limousine with her chest heaving, the city lights streaking past the windows. She turned to Ethan, her voice breaking. "Why did you do that? You just exposed everything." Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes dark. "I will not let anyone insult you, not now, not ever." Claire's tears finally spilled. This was supposed to be simple, Ethan. A contract, nothing more. Now the whole world knows. Ethan reached for her hand again, his grip strong and steady. "Let them know. You are mine." Claire's heart ached with confusion. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust the sincerity in his tone, but fear gnawed at her. The world outside was ruthless, and she was no longer invisible. She was Mrs. Grant, and the spotlight had just been turned on her. That night, as she lay in her Boston bedroom, she stared at her reflection in the mirror. The whispers had become screams, the secret had become public, and nothing would ever be the same again. The days after the gala unfolded like a storm that would not relent. Newspapers splashed Ethan Grant's declaration. Across their front pages, tabloids ran photos of Claire's stunned face, and television anchors dissected every detail of their sudden marriage. Claire could not step onto the campus without hearing her name whispered in hallways, or seeing her picture on someone's phone. Olivia tried to shield her, but even she could not hold back the tide. "You are everywhere, Claire," she said one afternoon, showing her a headline that read, "Secret Wife of Ethan Grant Exposed." Claire pressed her hands to her temples. This was supposed to be hidden. Ethan had broken the rules, and now there was no going back. She confronted him in his Manhattan office, the vast windows casting light across his desk. "Why did you do it?" she demanded, her voice trembling. Ethan looked up from a document, his expression unreadable. "Because they humiliated you. Because I will not let anyone treat my wife that way." Claire's throat tightened. "But this was a contract, Ethan. We agreed to stay in the shadows. You made me a target." Ethan stood slowly, his presence overwhelming. "I do not regret it. You deserve more than secrecy." Claire turned away, her heart pounding. "You say that now, but you do not know what this will cost." Ethan's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. That night, as rain lashed against her apartment windows, Claire sat awake, memories surfacing from the darkest corners of her past. She thought of the day of her parents' funeral, the way her grandfather's hands shook as he tried to comfort her, and the shadowed figure who had spoken quietly with him before vanishing into the storm. She had been too numb to notice then, but the memory had never left her. Days later, Ethan broke the silence himself. He found her in the penthouse library, her fingers tracing the spines of books she had never dared touch. "There is something you need to know," he said, his voice low, his eyes shadowed with secrets. She turned, fear prickling her skin. "What is it?" Ethan hesitated, then confessed, "I was at your parents' funeral." Claire's breath caught. "What do you mean, I saw you? I saw your grandfather. I spoke with him. He asked me to look after you, even if from afar." Claire's world tilted. "Why are you telling me this now? Because you deserve the truth. My family was involved in the accident. Not directly, but the business dealings that led to it were tied to Grant Enterprises." Claire staggered back, her hand covering her mouth. You knew all this time, and you married me anyway." Ethan's face was tight with pain. "I married you to protect you, to shield you from the enemies that destroyed your parents." Claire's eyes blurred with tears. "Protect me, you deceived me. This marriage was never protection. It was chains." She ran from the library, her sobs echoing through the marble halls. Ethan followed, his voice breaking. "Claire, please listen." But she slammed the door behind her, unable to bear another word. The next morning she packed a bag and left for Boston. Olivia welcomed her with open arms, but even her friend could not soothe the ache. Claire sat by her grandfather's bedside, watching his frail chest rise and fall, whispering, "I thought I could handle it, Grandpa, but I cannot." In Manhattan, Ethan buried himself in work, but every night he pulled up the same photograph on his phone, a candid shot of Claire laughing in the rain outside a cafe. He poured whiskey into a glass, staring at the image until dawn. The distance grew heavier with each day. Claire walked Boston's cobbled streets, her heart torn between rage and longing. She remembered Ethan's steady hand at the gala, the way he had stood before the world to claim her. But she also remembered his confession, the shadow of her parents' deaths entwined with his family name. One evening, unable to hold back, she whispered into the night air, "I love him and I hate him." Weeks passed. Rumors swirled louder than ever. Paparazzi camped outside her campus, shouting questions about her marriage. Olivia fought them off, but Claire felt like prey. One evening her phone buzzed. An unknown number. "Be careful. Victoria is circling. Do not trust anyone." Claire clutched the phone, tears burning her eyes. Even in silence, even in guilt, Ethan was still watching, still guarding her. Yet it was not enough. When she saw photographs of him attending events with Victoria by his side, her heart shattered anew. Alone in her Boston bedroom, she whispered through tears, "Was I only ever a shield for him? Was love just another lie?" Claire and Ethan were bound by secrets, shadows of the past, and enemies that refused to let go. Their marriage had started as a contract, but now it was a battlefield of love and betrayal, and neither knew if their hearts would survive. Claire drifted through the following weeks like a ghost, her body in Boston, but her heart trapped in Manhattan. She woke to the sound of her grandfather's cough, made his tea attended, her classes smiled, when Olivia cracked a joke, but every night when the world was quiet, she clutched her phone and stared at Ethan's last message. Be careful. Victoria is circling. Do not trust anyone. She wanted to delete it, to erase him from her life, but her thumb hovered over the screen as if refusing to let go. Olivia noticed the shadows beneath her friend's eyes. You miss him, she said one evening as they sat on the porch, the autumn wind rustling the leaves. Claire shook her head quickly. No, I am angry. I am betrayed. Olivia tilted her head. Those are feelings too, Claire. You cannot pretend you feel nothing. Claire looked down at her hands, silent. Across the city, Ethan sat in his office long after his employees had gone home. The skyline glittered beyond the glass walls, but he barely noticed. A folder lay open before him, filled with photographs of Claire leaving class, walking through the market, sitting on the porch with Olivia. His private security had kept her safe unseen, but Ethan's chest tightened with every image. He should have felt relieved. Instead, he felt hollow. He poured whiskey into a crystal glass, his reflection fractured in the amber liquid. He remembered her laugh at the gala, her trembling voice. When she confronted him, the tears that streaked her face when she learned the truth. He pressed a hand to his forehead, whispering to the empty room, I never wanted to hurt you. He stared at his phone, her number glowing on the screen, but his thumb froze. He wanted to call, to hear her voice, but fear rooted him. Fear that she would not answer, fear that she would. And so the silence grew. One night, Claire stood by her grandfather's window, watching the city lights in the distance. She imagined Ethan at his desk, imagined him staring out at the same lights, imagined him alone. Her chest ached with longing. She whispered softly, I hate that I still love you. Tears stung her eyes, but she let them fall. At the same time, Ethan sat in his penthouse, staring at the same night sky. His phone lay silent on the table, but in his mind, he heard her voice, the way she had once whispered his name with trembling affection. He closed his eyes, his chest tight with a pain he could not drink away. Days turned into weeks. Claire kept busy with her internship, but every time she saw the Grant Enterprises logo on a document, her heart clenched. At night, she dreamed of Ethan, waking with his name on her lips. She tried to push him away, but he lingered like a shadow she could not escape. Olivia urged her to move on. You deserve someone who is honest, Claire. Someone who will choose you without secrets. Claire nodded, but her heart refused to listen. Ethan, too, was drowning. At board meetings, he delivered sharp commands, but his thoughts drifted to her. In the middle of negotiations, he would glance at the empty chair beside him and imagine her sitting there steadying him with her quiet strength. His colleagues noticed the change. He was sharper, colder, more ruthless. They did not know it was because every deal felt meaningless without her. One evening, as rain fell over Boston, Claire sat at her desk, exhaustion pulling at her eyes. She reached into her drawer and found the sleek black card Ethan had given her months ago. She ran her fingers over the embossed initials, CG. For a moment, she considered tearing it in half. Instead, she pressed it to her chest, whispering, "Why can I not let you go?" That same night, Ethan walked into his empty penthouse, silence pressing against him. He loosened his tie, poured another drink, and sank into the leather chair. On the coffee table lay the wedding band he had removed after Claire left. He picked it up, staring at the simple gold circle, and felt the weight of her absence crush him. Their lives ran parallel, separated by anger and silence, yet bound by love neither could deny. Claire's tears fell onto her pillow as she whispered his name into the darkness. Ethan's whisper echoed through the empty penthouse, her name breaking in his throat. They were apart, but their hearts still reached for each other, beating in pain, in longing, in silence. The scandal struck like a lightning bolt on a cloudless day, sudden and merciless. Claire woke to the sound of Olivia pounding on her bedroom door, her voice sharp with panic. "Claire, get up. You need to see this." Sleep still clung to her eyes as she stumbled to the living room, where Olivia thrust her phone into Claire's trembling hands. The screen blazed with headlines: "Secret Wife or Gold Digger?" The truth about Ethan Grant's mysterious bride. Claire's heart sank as she scrolled through article after article, filled with photographs of her walking across campus buying groceries, even sitting quietly on her grandfather's porch. Every image was framed by cruel captions: opportunist, manipulative, pretending to be ordinary while seducing a billionaire. Claire's knees buckled. How did they get these photos? Olivia seethed. Who would do this? Claire swallowed hard, but she already knew. Victoria. Only Victoria had both motive and reach. Paparazzi swarmed outside the apartment by noon. Claire could not step out without flashbulbs exploding in her face. Questions hurled like stones. "Mrs. Grant, did you trick Ethan into marrying you? Did you trap him with a contract? How much money are you after?" Claire fled back inside her chest, heaving tears streaking her cheeks. That night her phone rang. Ethan's voice came through calm and commanding. "Stay inside. Do not respond to anyone. I will handle this." Claire's anger broke through her fear. "Handle this how Ethan. You made me a secret, and now they are tearing me apart." Ethan's silence stretched heavy. Then he said, "Tomorrow. Trust me." The next day the world turned its eyes on Manhattan. Cameras filled the press hall of Grant Enterprises reporters, elbowing for space. Ethan Grant walked to the podium immaculate in a tailored suit, his expression carved from steel. The room hushed. "The only woman I love is Claire Grant." He declared, his voice steady and resolute. "She is my wife. She always will be." Gasps rippled across the room. Photographers clicked furiously, flashes illuminating his sharp jawline and unwavering gaze. Claire watched the live stream from Boston, her breath caught in her chest. He was not hiding anymore. He was not silent. He was hers. Reporters shouted questions. Was the marriage real? Was she after his fortune? Ethan raised a hand. "Claire has given me nothing but strength. If you dare call her a gold digger, then you insult me because I chose her, and I will choose her every day." The press hall erupted with chaos, but Ethan did not flinch. His eyes, dark and steady, seemed to cut through the cameras and reach for Claire herself. Olivia squeezed her friend's hand, eyes wide with awe. "Claire, he just told the whole world he loves you." Claire's heart raced, tears spilling freely down her cheeks. She touched the ring on her finger, whispering Ethan. For the first time since their marriage began, she felt seen, not hidden, not erased. Yet even as joy swelled inside her, fear remained. His enemies would not stop. His declaration had painted a target on them both. That night, Ethan called her again, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "Did you see it, Claire?" "Yes," she whispered. "You should not have done that. You exposed yourself." Ethan exhaled, weary, yet certain. "I will expose myself 1,000 times if it means protecting you." Claire's tears fell silently as she held the phone to her chest. For the first time, she believed his words. For the first time, she allowed herself to hope. But hope was dangerous, and love even more so. Claire returned to Manhattan a week later, stepping into the glass tower of Grant Enterprises with her heart pounding. Security escorted her past the flashing cameras, but it was Ethan's presence in the lobby that made her breath falter. He stood waiting in a charcoal suit, eyes locked on her, the crowd melting away until it felt like only the two of them existed. When they reached his office, silence stretched thick between them. Finally, Claire broke it, her voice trembling. "Do you love me, Ethan? Or do you just feel guilty because of my parents, because of what your family did?" Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes darkening. "Never guilt, Claire, only love. My only regret is not telling you sooner." Claire's throat tightened. "How can I believe you when everything began with secrets? When our marriage was nothing but a contract?" Ethan stepped closer, his voice steady but raw. "That contract was paper. This is real. Every time I looked at you, every time I wanted to protect you, it was not duty. It was you." Claire turned away, her eyes burning with tears. "You destroyed the rules we agreed on. You exposed me to the world. Now I am drowning in whispers and lies." Ethan reached for her hand, holding it tightly against his chest. "And I would do it all again, because I cannot stand one more day watching you suffer alone." Claire's tears spilled as she whispered, "You make everything so complicated." Ethan smiled faintly, his thumb brushing her cheek. "Love is complicated, Claire, but it is the only thing worth it." For a long moment she searched his face, desperate to find deception, but all she saw was raw truth. The walls she had built around her heart cracked. Slowly trembling, she whispered, "I love you too, Ethan." His breath caught, as if he had been waiting a lifetime for those words. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly it felt like he would never let go. Their lips met in a kiss that burned away every doubt, every shadow, every whispered rumor. It was not the kiss of a contract, but of two souls colliding. That night, in the quiet of his penthouse, they spoke in fragments, in touches, in broken confessions that slowly mended the wounds between them. Claire lay in his arms, her head resting against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. Ethan brushed his fingers through her hair and murmured, "You are my beginning and my end." Claire lifted her face to his, her eyes shimmering. "Then promise me no more secrets." Ethan kissed her forehead softly. "No more secrets." They fell asleep, entwined the city, glittering beyond the windows, their hearts finally beating in unison. Dinner at the Grant estate was less a meal and more a battlefield. Claire walked into the sprawling dining room, her arm looped through Ethan's, her nerves burning with every step. The table stretched endlessly, lined with silverware polished to perfection, crystal glasses gleaming in the chandelier's light. At the far end sat Ethan's mother, Margaret Grant, regal and icy, beside his father, Richard, whose gaze carried the weight of generations of power. On the other side of the table sat uncles, aunts, and cousins, all watching Claire with carefully disguised disdain. Ethan pulled out her chair, his hand steady on her back, his presence a silent reassurance. As the courses began, Margaret's voice sliced through the air. "Claire, tell us, how exactly does one go from being a Boston student to the wife of my son, the CEO of Grant Enterprises?" Claire steadied her hands on her lap, her pulse quick. "With honesty, Mrs. Grant, and with love." Richard scoffed softly, his glass clinking against the table. Love does not protect fortunes. Love does not secure alliances. This marriage threatens everything we built. Ethan's voice cut through like steel. Enough. Claire is my wife. That is the only truth that matters. Margaret leaned forward, her eyes sharp. You risk our reputation. For a girl with no pedigree, no wealth, no influence, why should we accept her? Claire straightened, summoning courage. Because I am not here for your wealth. I am not here for your approval. I am here because Ethan chose me, and because I choose him. I will never compete with your fortune, but I will stand by him when your fortune means nothing. Silence fell heavy over the table. Ethan's hand slid over hers, pride flickering in his eyes. His mother's lips thinned, but she said no more. The dinner dragged on tense and brittle. When it ended, Ethan and Claire walked into the night air of the estate gardens. He pulled her close, his voice low. You were brilliant. Claire sighed, her eyes shimmering. I was terrified. Ethan kissed her softly. You were perfect. Days later, Claire returned to Boston to find her grandfather weaker than before. She sat by his side, holding his fragile hand as he whispered, I heard what happened at the estate. You stood strong, Claire. I am proud. Tears welled in her eyes. Grandpa, I could not have done it without Ethan. He smiled faintly, his breath shallow. Good. Then you are not alone anymore. That night, as thunder rolled outside, her grandfather's hand slipped from hers for the last time. Claire's sobs filled the quiet room, grief crashing over her like a wave. Ethan arrived too late, his suit damp from rain, his expression shadowed with sorrow. He knelt beside her, wrapping his arms around her shaking frame. I am here, Claire. I am here. The funeral was small, filled with old friends and quiet prayers. Claire stood at the graveside, clutching a single rose. When she placed it on the coffin, her voice cracked. Thank you for everything, Grandpa. I will carry your love with me always. Afterward, Ethan held her tightly, whispering promises of never letting her face the world alone. In the weeks that followed, grief slowly turned into strength. Claire returned to Manhattan with Ethan, her resolve hardened. At another family gathering, she walked into the estate, not as an outsider, but as someone who had faced loss and survived. Margaret watched her closely, her expression unreadable, but this time she did not question her. Instead, she raised a glass, her voice measured. To the Grant family, to resilience, to love. Claire met her gaze and lifted her own glass, a silent truce forming in the flicker of candlelight. Ethan squeezed her hand under the table, his eyes soft with pride. Outside the city hummed a world of power and secrets, still waiting to test them. But for the first time, Claire felt ready. She had faced whispers, humiliation, grief, and the icy disapproval of a dynasty. Yet she stood tall, her heart bound to Ethan's. She knew trials were not over, but she also knew that love, complicated and imperfect as it was, had made her stronger. And with Ethan beside her, she could endure anything. 1 year later, the city of New York gleamed beneath the golden light of spring as Claire Bennett stepped out of the university auditorium in her graduation gown. Applause echoed in her ears, friends and classmates laughing, tossing their caps into the air. She smiled, clutching her diploma, but her heart beat faster for another reason. Across the courtyard stood Ethan Grant, waiting in a tailored suit, his eyes locked only on her. He moved through the crowd as if no one else existed, stopping in front of her with a small velvet box in his hand. Claire froze her breath, catching as Ethan slowly dropped to one knee. Gasps and murmurs rose from the gathering crowd. His voice carried steady and unshaken. "Claire Bennett, you thought our marriage began with a contract with shadows and secrets, but today, in front of everyone, I ask you for a real beginning. Will you marry me again, not in secrecy, not in silence, but openly and forever?" Claire's eyes filled with tears. The world around her blurred until only Ethan remained, his face full of certainty, his hand extended with a diamond ring that sparkled in the sun. She nodded, her voice trembling but clear. "Yes, Ethan, 1,000 times yes." Cheers erupted as Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, a kiss that erased every whisper, every doubt, every shadow of the past. Cameras flashed, classmates clapped, professors smiled, and for the first time, their love was not hidden but celebrated. Weeks later, the wedding unfolded in the grand cathedral of St. Patrick's, its high arches echoing with music, its aisles lined with roses. Claire walked toward Ethan in a gown of white silk, her veil trailing behind her like a river of light. Ethan stood at the altar, his expression softened, his gray eyes filled with devotion. As she reached him, he took her hand, pressing it to his lips before the priest spoke the vows. Claire's voice trembled with emotion as she whispered, "I thought a secret marriage would be simple, but love made it complicated and unforgettable." Ethan's vow was steady, his words carved into the moment. "Whatever storms come, I will never let you face them alone. You are my home, Claire." Their kiss sealed the vows, the cathedral erupting with applause. Outside on Fifth Avenue, confetti rained down as they stepped into the waiting limousine, hand in hand, hearts unshakable. At the reception, laughter filled the air, friends and family raising glasses. Olivia wiping tears, even Margaret Grant offering a quiet smile of acceptance. Claire leaned against Ethan's shoulder, the music swelling as he whispered into her ear, "This time it is forever." She smiled through happy tears. Forever sounds perfect. As night fell and the city lights glittered, they stood together on the balcony of the Grant penthouse, the wind carrying the sound of celebration below. Ethan wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. They had faced secrets, lies, betrayal, and grief. Yet love had endured, stronger than steel, softer than light. Claire looked at him, her heart overflowing, and whispered, "We made it." Ethan kissed her gently, the city glowing around them, their future unwritten, but theirs to claim.